She claimed she was pregnant with his baby. Then the truth came out. Before we start, please like and subscribe. Act 1. They say weddings bring out the best and worst in people. What they don't tell you is how they can shatter illusions you never dared to question. I'm Elara, and today, just days before I'm supposed to walk down the aisle, am standing frozen in my bedroom, Mason's phone clutched in my trembling hands, my world unraveling with every passing second. I didn't take the pill that night. A single message. 10 little words. But they're enough to rip the air from my lungs. Selena, his ex, the woman he swore was nothing but a distant memory. But memories don't send texts like this, do they? Memories don't wear his hoodie, don't sprawl across the bed we share, don't leave behind a trail of kisses in the shadows of my life. My fingers scroll down, and the screen flashes with secrets I was never meant to see. Flirty texts, stolen moments, pictures, God, the pictures. I feel the ground sway beneath me, nausea curling in my gut like a slow, merciless tide. 2 nights ago, I remember it vividly, curled up in bed, feverish and weak, dialing his number over and over. His excuse? Sorry, my phone died at work. Lies. All of it. The engagement ring on my finger feels wrong now, like a weight, like a chain, like a cruel joke the universe is playing on me. I thought heartbreak was supposed to be loud, messy, but right now, it's silent, creeping in like a thief, stealing everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and Mason. And just like that, the life I was about to promise to him feels like a beautifully wrapped lie, waiting to be torn apart. I was ready for a wedding. I wasn't ready for war. Act 2, the betrayal. The pre-wedding party is in full swing, golden lights strung across the backyard, music pulsing through the air and laughter spilling like champagne. But it all feels distant, like I'm trapped in a glass box, watching my life play out from the outside. I weave through the crowd, heart pounding, scanning for Mason. My stomach knots tighter with every step. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe there's a perfectly logical explanation. But then I see her. Selena stands in the corner, one manicured hand wrapped around a glass of wine, the other resting casually on Mason's chest. His chest. They're too close, their bodies angled like they belong together. The flickering lights catch the smirk tugging at her lips, and when her eyes meet mine across the room, a chill slides down my spine. She knows. My grip tightens around the champagne flute in my hand. The glass feels like it might shatter under the pressure. Every inch of me screams to march over there and scream, but I don't. Instead, I watch. And it's a mistake, because then it happens. She leans in, lips brushing against Mason's ear, whispering something I can't hear. He smiles, and then she kisses him. Right there. In front of everyone. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Conversations stall. And suddenly, it feels like the entire party has turned to watch the drama unfold. My breath catches in my throat, but I can't look away. Mason jerks back, his eyes wide with something that isn't guilt. No, it's panic. His hands shoot up as if that will somehow erase what just happened. Elara, he stammers, taking a step toward me. I take a step back. Don't. My voice is sharper than I expect. Stronger? But inside, I'm breaking apart. It was just a game, Mason blurts out, desperation thick in his tone. Truth or dare? Elara. That's all. He laughs nervously, like this is some silly misunderstanding. Something inside me snaps. I stare at him, my voice deathly quiet. Truth or dare? I repeat, stepping closer until I can see the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Then tell me the truth, Mason. I tilt my head, eyes burning into his. Were you with her 2 nights ago when I was sick and alone? His mouth opens, closes. His throat bobs as he swallows hard. But no words come. His silence says everything. The champagne glass slips from my fingers, shattering against the ground. But I barely hear it over the roaring in my ears. The weight of humiliation and betrayal presses down on me like a tidal wave, and I feel sick. I turn away, ignoring the whispers, the stares. Selena's laugh follows me, soft and victorious. I don't give her the satisfaction of looking back. Not now. Not ever. But as I walk away, my fingers tighten around something unfamiliar. Act 3, the turning point. It isn't until I'm halfway home, the night air cold against my skin, that I realize I took Mason's phone by accident. Or maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Maybe it's fate finally deciding I deserve the truth. My hands tremble as I pull the car into my driveway, the weight of the sleek black phone in my lap feeling heavier than it should. A wall rages inside me, part of me wanting to throw it out the window, to pretend I didn't see anything. But the other part, the part that's tired of being lied to, humiliated, played, it takes over. I swipe the screen to life, My own reflection staring back at me for a moment before the messages flood in. The texts I saw earlier were bad. So bad. But what I find now? It's worse. There's a hidden album. Of course there is. My heart pounds as I open it, bile rising in my throat. Photos of them together. Selena in his shirt, lying across his chest in our bed. The bed I thought was ours. Some of them date back months. Months. I feel sick, but I keep scrolling, unable to stop myself from digging deeper into my own misery. Then I find the messages, the ones where he talks about me. She's just predictable, too good to leave, too boring to keep. I suck in a sharp breath, but it does nothing to stop the ache spreading through my chest like wildfire. My hands are shaking so badly now that I almost drop the phone. Predictable, too good to leave, too boring to keep. It's funny, in a sick, twisted way. I was planning a future with a man who saw me as an obligation rather than a choice. My entire world, the love I thought we shared, was nothing more than a safety net to him. Tears prick my eyes, hot and relentless, but I refuse to let them fall. No, not for him, not anymore. I don't hesitate. I pull the ring from my finger, set it on the kitchen counter, and with a deep breath, I call off the wedding. Just like that, I expect relief. Instead, there's a cold, hollow emptiness. The next morning, my mother is in my kitchen, standing with perfect posture, a glass of wine already in hand despite the early hour. Her lips press into a thin line as she stares at me, disappointment radiating off her in waves. Do you know how this looks, Elara? Her voice is clipped, sharp like a knife. I meet her gaze, forcing myself to stand tall. Do you know how this feels, Mom? She doesn't flinch. Feelings don't matter to her. Image does. Mason was the right choice. The safe choice. The man with the perfect family and the perfect job. And now, instead of gaining a wealthy son-in-law, she's left with a daughter who's making a scene. My happiness? A minor inconvenience. I knew you'd find a way to ruin this, she says coldly, setting the glass down with a hard clink. Mason adored you. Do you think anyone else will? I don't answer. There's no point. Luckily, I'm not alone in this. Mia, my best friend, is there the moment my mother leaves, bursting through the door with a mixture of rage and unwavering loyalty. She hugs me tightly, and for the first time in days, I let myself break. Just a little. You deserve so much better, Elle, she whispers, smoothing my hair back. And you're going to be okay? And then there's Adrian, Maya's older brother. He's always been around, quiet, watchful, a presence in the background of my life. But now he's stepping closer, offering something I didn't even know I needed. He shows up unannounced, hands tucked into his pockets, eyes steady and unreadable as they meet mine. You're stronger than this, he says simply, like it's a fact. I want to argue, to say I don't feel strong at all, but the way he looks at me, like he sees something in me that even I've forgotten, makes my words catch in my throat. You always were, he adds, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. There's something different about him now, something I hadn't noticed before. A quiet intensity, a warmth that feels safe. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel so alone. Act 4, the fallout. Just when I think things can't possibly get worse, Selena proves me wrong. It happens on a Thursday afternoon. I'm at my favorite cafe, the one place I can usually escape to, where the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of indie music let me pretend, just for a moment, that my life isn't in pieces. But peace is a luxury I don't get today. The chair across from me scrapes against the floor, and I look up to see her. Selena. She's dressed to kill, perfectly curled hair, designer sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown. She doesn't ask if she can sit. She simply does, as if she owns the world and everything in it. Surprised to see me? She purrs, sliding a folded piece of paper across the table with the slow precision of someone savoring the moment. I stare at it like it might catch fire. Mason's going to be a dad, she says, her lips curling with satisfaction. My heart stops. Then it starts again, too fast, too loud. The words echo in my ears, ricocheting around my skull. I force my shaking hands to unfold the paper. And there it is, an ultrasound picture, attached to an official-looking pregnancy report. The cafe around me fades into a blur of noise and color. I can't breathe. My vision tunnels, darkening at the edges. Selena leans in, her voice syrupy sweet. Thought you should know, since you love him so much? I swallow down the bile rising in my throat, forcing my lips to move. You're lying. Am I? She tilts her head, tapping a manicured nail against the ultrasound. Guess you'll have to ask Mason. I want to scream. I want to throw the paper in her smug face. Instead, I gather what little dignity I have left, shove my chair back, and walk out without another word. But I can feel her eyes on me, feel the satisfaction radiating off her like heat. Mason's reaction is exactly what I expect, stunned, panicked, and yet, somehow hopeful. I swear, I didn't know, he says, running a hand through his hair, pacing my living room like a trapped animal. But this changes nothing, Elara. I love you. I let out a hollow laugh. You don't even know what love is, Mason. My voice trembles, but I don't let it break. Not in front of him. He reaches for me, desperation in his eyes. We can work through this. I was stupid. But I want us. You and me. We can get through anything, right? I step back, my stomach churning. The ring I had returned to him glints in the low light of my apartment. A cruel reminder of everything I almost gave up for him. Go home, Mason. His jaw tightens, frustration flickering across his face. But for once, I don't care. He leaves, and I collapse onto the couch, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. And then there's a knock at the door. I expect Mia, but it's Adrian. He stands there in his usual quiet way, hands in his jacket pockets, his dark eyes scanning my face like he already knows. And maybe he does. Bad time? He asks softly. I shake my head, and without another word, he steps inside. Adrian's different from Mason in every way. He doesn't fill the silence with empty promises or apologies. He just is. And for the first time all day, I don't feel like I'm drowning. I hand him the pregnancy report without a word. He studies it for a long moment, his jaw ticking. Something feels off, he finally says. I blink. What do you mean? He holds it up to the light, his sharp gaze narrowing. It's too perfect, too polished. I know someone who can look into this. Adrian, I start to protest, but he just shakes his head. Let me help. His voice is firm, steady. You don't have to do this alone. And for some reason, I let him. 2 days later, Adrian shows up with a storm in his eyes and a folder in his hand. You were right, he says, dropping it onto my coffee table. Selena's pregnancy report? It's fake. I stare at him, the words not quite sinking in. Fake. She never went to that clinic. The ultrasound? It's a stock image from the internet. His lips press into a thin line. She's been lying to everyone? A laugh bubbles up in my throat, sharp and bitter. Of course she has. This whole thing, this whole nightmare, has been her twisted game. The anger that simmers beneath my skin boils over. And before I know it, I'm driving to Selena's apartment. Adrian insists on coming with me. And I don't argue. When she opens the door, she doesn't look surprised to see me. If anything, she looks amused. That was fast, she says, leaning against the doorframe, her eyes flickering over to Adrian. Looks like you found a rebound already? Cute. I shove the fake report into her hands. You really thought you could get away with this? She just smirks, shrugging like it's no big deal. It was worth a shot. Her nonchalance is infuriating. Why? I demand. Selena's eyes darken, and for the first time, I see something real beneath her perfectly constructed mask. Because I don't lose, she says quietly, stepping closer. And because, at the end of the day, Elara, you'll still be the one alone. But this time, I don't believe her. I turn to Adrian, who watches me with something that looks a lot like admiration. Come on, I say, and together, we walk away, leaving Selena and all her lies behind. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally choosing me. Act 5. Building a new life, moving into my new apartment downtown feels like stepping into a completely different world. It's nothing like the pristine picture, perfect house Mason and I were supposed to share. No marble countertops, no carefully curated furniture, no scent of his expensive cologne lingering in the air. Instead, it smells like fresh paint and cardboard boxes. It's messy and chaotic, with scuffed hardwood floors, and a leaky faucet that drips just enough to drive me insane at night. But it's mine. Every inch of it. And somehow, Adrian is always here. At first, I think it's just coincidence. Maybe he's checking in out of obligation, because Mia made him promise to keep an eye on me. But as the days turn into weeks, I realize it's more than that. He shows up with coffee in the mornings and takeout in the evenings, fixing the wonky cabinet doors without being asked, standing beside me when I get overwhelmed by all the things I don't know how to do on my own. One night, as he helps me hang my artwork on the bare walls, I finally ask, "Why are you always here?" He pauses, mid-hammer, and looks at me with a small, almost sheepish smile. "I like seeing you happy." The words settle deep inside me, curling in the hollow spaces I didn't even realize were still empty. I don't know what to say, so I look away, pretending to focus on the crooked frame he just hung. But my heart pounds, the edges of something new, something terrifying, tugging at me in a way I haven't felt in years. Slowly, I start painting again. It happens one afternoon when the loneliness starts pressing in and the memories feel too heavy. I find an old canvas buried under a pile of clothes, and before I know it, I'm mixing colors, letting the brush move the way it used to, back when I painted for me, not for anyone else. Mason used to dismiss it, waving a hand, and calling it just a hobby, like it was something I'd eventually outgrow. But Adrian? He watches me like my art means something. Like I mean something. You should do this full time, he says one day, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, watching me blend deep shades of blue across the canvas. I let out a breathless laugh. Yeah, right? I'm serious, Elara. His voice is steady, filled with a quiet conviction that makes my chest tighten. You come alive when you paint. Don't let anyone make you think it's not worth it. For the first time I think, maybe he's right. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself imagine a future where I don't have to shrink myself to fit into someone else's expectations. Where I can be bold and messy and real. Adrian doesn't push. He doesn't try to fix me. He just stays. And somehow, that's enough. But just when I start to feel like I'm finally moving forward, Mason shows up at my door. His eyes are softer than I remember, like he's rehearsed this moment over and over in his head. I made a mistake, he says, his voice full of regret. I miss you, Elara. The weight of his words used to have power over me. But now they feel empty. I glance over my shoulder, where Adrian is sitting on my couch, flipping through an art book he bought me last week. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. I turn back to Mason, lifting my chin. I don't miss you. He falters, searching my face for any sign of the girl he left behind. But she's gone now, and I'm finally becoming someone I actually want to be. As I close the door, Adrian looks up, his lips curling into the smallest of smiles. Proud of you. And for the first time in my life, I'm proud of myself too. Act 6, The Revelation. The city stretches out beneath us, glittering like 1,000 tiny promises. The cool night air hums with distant sirens, and the occasional burst of laughter from the street below. Adrian sits beside me on my tiny balcony, his long legs stretched out, fingers idly tapping against the armrest of his chair. There's a comfortable silence between us, the kind I've come to cherish. But tonight, there's something different in the air. He's been quiet, more so than usual, and when I glance at him, his jaw is tense, his eyes distant as if he's caught in a memory he's not sure he should share. I'm about to ask what's wrong when he speaks first. I met you years ago, he says, his voice softer than I've ever heard it. I blink, caught off guard. What? He exhales a small, almost self-conscious laugh, and rubs the back of his neck. You probably don't remember, but I do. I straighten in my chair, watching him carefully. What do you mean? You were at an art gallery, he says, his eyes finally meeting mine. There's something tender there, something raw. It was a small show, nothing fancy. But you. He pauses, and I see the ghost of a smile touch his lips. You were standing in front of this abstract piece, bright colors, wild brushstrokes, and you were talking about it like it meant everything in the world. A memory flickers in my mind. Years ago, before Mason, before everything. I'd been younger, braver. I remember standing in that gallery, dreaming out loud to anyone who would listen. You were there? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. He nods. I was. I search his face, trying to place him in that moment. But it's like trying to recall a dream after waking up. Why didn't you say anything? Adrian leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his expression thoughtful. Because I didn't think I was enough for you. The honesty in his voice knocks the breath from my lungs. I stare at him, my heart stumbling over itself. Adrian. He shakes his head with a small, almost embarrassed chuckle. You were so passionate, so alive. And me? I was just some guy standing in the background, trying to figure out where I fit in the world. I realize then how much I've misjudged him. The quiet, observant Adrian, the first thought I knew was so much more than I ever imagined. All those times he lingered at the edges of my life, I had no idea he was carrying this piece of me with him. You should have said something, I murmur, reaching for his hand without thinking. His fingers are warm, steady, and this time, I don't let go. He looks at our intertwined hands for a long moment before his thumb brushes gently against mine. Maybe I wasn't ready then, he says, his voice low. But I am now. A shiver runs through me. But it's not from the cold. It's from the weight of this moment, of all the missed chances, and the quiet waiting that led us here. All this time, I trail off, my chest tight with emotions I don't know how to name. I didn't want to get in the way, he admits, his dark eyes searching mine. But when I saw you with Mason, I knew he didn't see you the way I did. The way I do. My breath catches. The truth in his words, the way they fill the spaces Mason never could, leaves me reeling. I squeeze his hand, a small smile forming on my lips. I think you've always been enough, Adrian? I just didn't know it until now. His eyes darken slightly, his lips parting like he wants to say something. But instead, he just smiles, one of those rare, genuine smiles that feels like a sunrise after a long night. And for the first time in a long time, I realize I'm not looking back anymore. I'm moving forward with him. Act 7, the climax. The art gala is everything I dreamed of, soft golden lights, the murmur of sophisticated conversation, the quiet hum of admiration for my work displayed on the pristine white walls. Tonight is supposed to be about new beginnings, about finally stepping into the person I was always meant to be. And then she walks in. Selena. She makes an entrance like she owns the place, wearing a dress so tight it looks painted onto her skin, her signature smirk plastered across her face. I see the heads turn, the whispers start, but I don't need to hear them. I already know what they're saying. I brace myself, refusing to let her ruin this for me. But when she struts right up to the center of the room, her voice carries loud and clear over the hushed crowd. I just wanted to congratulate Elara, she says sweetly, but her eyes gleam with malice. Mason and I are working things out, after all. A ripple of shock spreads through the room. My stomach tightens, but I don't let it show. The Elara from a few months ago might have crumbled, might have run, might have let the humiliation swallow her whole. But not anymore. I take a deep breath, feeling the weight of Adrian's steady gaze from across the room. He's watching me, not with pity, but with a quiet, unwavering confidence, like he already knows I'll rise above this. And suddenly, I do too. I turn to Selena with a slow, deliberate smile. You can have him. The room falls silent. Even the music seems to pause. Selena's smirk falters for half a second. Excuse me? She scoffs, though I can see the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. You heard me, I say, my voice calm, steady. You can have Mason. Every lie, every excuse, every betrayal. Because I've finally realized, I deserve more than him. I tilt my head slightly, letting my words sink in. And definitely more than your drama. A stunned murmur moves through the crowd, and I see Mason lingering near the entrance, his expression frozen somewhere between regret and disbelief. But I don't look at him, not anymore. Selena's face hardens, but for the first time, she has no witty comeback, no sharp retort. I see the flicker of frustration in her perfectly lined eyes. She expected me to break. Instead, I've just shown her I'm unbreakable. I feel Adrian step up beside me then, his hand brushing lightly against mine in silent support. He doesn't need to say anything, his presence alone is enough. And somehow, with him standing there, the past feels a little further away. Wow, Selena finally sneers, forcing a laugh. Look at you, acting all high and mighty now. We both know you're just. No, Selena, I interrupt, my voice sharper now. We're done. I'm done. I watch as realization dawns in her eyes. There's nothing left for her to take from me. No power. No control. The weight that's been pressing down on my chest for so long suddenly feels lighter. With one last glance at Mason, whose eyes are full of something that might have been love once, but now looks a lot more like regret, I turn away. I don't need his apology. I don't need closure. I have something better. I have me. As I walk away, Adrian leans in close, his voice just above a whisper. That was incredible. I smile, feeling something unfamiliar, but intoxicating blooming in my chest. Pride? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? And for the first time in a long time, I know I've won. Not over Selena, not over Mason, but over the version of myself who once thought they were the only love I deserved. I'm finally free, and it feels damn good. Later that night, Adrian and I sit together in my apartment, the city sprawling beyond the windows. So, what now? He asks, his fingers brushing against mine. I smile, leaning into him. A new adventure? And this time, it's on my terms. The end.